despite being one of the largest crude oil producers in Africa, Nigeria has been unable to convert its abundant oil into financial wealth to drive growth, as the country has lost an estimated $50 billion worth of investment in 10 years, created by uncertainty, lack of progress, and stagnation in the petroleum industry. However, with the signing into law of the Petroleum Industry Act by President Muhammadu Buhari, now this means that the sector is about to record a major breakthrough, as the industry now has a legal, governance, regulatory, and fiscal framework that will create a level playing field and open windows of opportunities, thereby putting an end to uncertainties in the industry in the future. Amidst the few criticisms that has trailed the new legislation, industry experts are of the view that the PIA will promote more competition in the country's oil and gas sector in a manner that could bring about more efficient system, more product choices, and lower prices in the long term. I introduced him earlier. He's joining via Skype. He's a partner, commercial and energy law practice at Candelp, as well as the director at Aspen Energy. Mr. Israel Aye joins me via Skype. Thank you very much, Mr. Aye. It's good to see you this afternoon.
It's great to be here. Thank you very much.
Yes. Should I start this way? I don't want to start with the complaints or the criticisms that actually trailed this development. Let me start with the positives. A lot of expectations with regards to investment. Even the president came out to say about $50 billion has been lost, talking about not having certainty or clarity in governance and fiscal policies with regards to the oil and gas industry. How much of positives do you see the PIA bringing into Nigeria's oil and gas industry? Let's start on that note.
Okay, yeah. In terms of the positives, in the way you have said, the spelling of the cloud of uncertainty which you referred to is one that everybody has become familiar with. I remember when we were on the road and we were basically engaged in in sort of advocacy to various levels of government in order for them to prioritize the passage of what was the PIB, now the PIA. We would say to them a very simple message, that investors can model risks, but no investor can model uncertainty, to the effect, in fact, that in some cases, countries that maybe have relative security or insecurity, but have stable legal and fiscal regimes, can attract investment. Now, you have to understand that in order to be able to maximize the potential of the petroleum industry, and I'm talking about the entire value chain, you need capital employment. We're talking about, tens and hundreds of billions of dollars, which is not necessarily available here. So you need to make the environment not only conducive, but you also need to make it stable for persons to be able to bring in that amount of capital, because again, it takes a reasonable amount of time in order to be able to get returns. So that's definitely the first thing, and that's probably a bit of the reason. If I may, I could also mention one or two things very quickly. It also puts in place a legal and fiscal framework to develop what I refer to as a petroleum industry. And again, the argument I make in this space, if you will, is that what we had was an extractive framework rather than a petroleum industry. And for there to be a petroleum industry, we need to be using that product internally. We need to have a lot of Nigerians participating in it. That journey, of course, has started over time, but this is hopefully going to accelerate it. What does it do? It segments the industry, both for licensing and for regulatory purposes, and it also facilitates the creation of the midstream, which is a lot of where you create the value. So that's another positive to take away from here. And there are a lot more, but I'll probably stop here and respond to your questions.
All right, let me now move to this concerns as when we go on the streets and we read in the newspaper and online, and everyone is talking about host community 3%, and of course the frontier exploration issue. The minister was out last week to say 3% of something is better than 100% of nothing. I don't know if you're thinking along that line.
You know, over the weekend there was a beautiful piece of write-up, an article that came out known as The Triumph of Mischief. I'm not entirely sure who wrote it, but it's a very poignant piece of writing, and anybody who can lay their hands on it, I'll recommend that they go look at it. You know, sometimes when we throw numbers out and up in the air, it is either born out of ignorance or just by people who I refer to as merchants of chaos. Again, when you say 3%, when you say 30%, what is the reference point? We're not comparing apples with apples. Just so we're clear, we're talking about 3% of the operating expense of the companies in the course of last year. So that's a definite amount you can determine from the beginning of the year. Even in a constrained environment, that amounts to approximately $500 million. That's $500 million, additional to whatever else has been allocated to that segment of the country. And that's not a bad thing necessarily. To the extent that it is additional, it is incremental, the first response is to laud it. Now, when you talk about 30%, what is it reference to? 30% is referenced to certain things which include the profit of NNPC. You and I know that it is only this year we're talking about the possibility of NNPC declaring any kind of profit. And the best calculations available show that we're talking potentially of about $60 million at the most, if you compared them. So that's not a fair conversation. At all events, when we talk about the frontier area is probably not even a part of the country in the way people have described it. Okay, the frontier area includes the Anambra Basin, it includes the Benue Basin, it includes, new areas. Now, I'm not entirely a fan of the frontier fund for an entirely different sort of reason, but there is no basis for comparing or for comparison between that one fund and the other, and they don't quite frankly take from each other. And I think that we should rest that. It is, in my opinion, irresponsible to fly such a kite and to read such red herrings in a very testy polity such as ours, and people should desist from it already. What it is that this is the first ever fund that is targeted at the host communities, that is going to directly impact them. All the other funds, including the derivation, the 30% derivation, including the percentage that is paid for NDDC, and all the other funds are targeted at the region, and those need to be dealt with. But this one is going to hit the grassroots. And what we need to be thinking about is how to ensure that the sudden injection of $500 million into those communities does not result into another layer or level of the resource curse. And that's probably something to talk about, but not to compare two things that are definitely not comparable. There is nothing to compare one to the other. I think we should just move on and have better conversations.
Mr. Aye, let's now talk about subsidy. The minister has clearly come out to also say that the price of PMS will remain at 162 to 165 naira until they conclude talks with Labour. Now, what do you make of this? Because already it's a law. So what do you think could happen with regards to subsidy? And of course, one way or the other, issues around refining. What positives does this law have for refining in Nigeria?
Okay, again, we're very happy that the Petroleum Industry Act is here and it is with us. But the Petroleum Industry Act in and of itself will not create the results we desire. There is a space somewhere that policy decisions will need to come in. Policy decisions will need to come in. There's a place somewhere where the implementation of programs that are enabled by the law will need to come into place. Now, with respect to petroleum products, okay, what should we be doing? To start with, how did we get to where we are? It is simply because we have not over time expanded our capacity to refine. And that's probably not a simple conversation. There are many dimensions and many layers to this conversation. But as a people, the challenge that is right before us is how we can unlock that space and grow capacity for the production of downstream products. That is the only way we're going to be able to bring prices down. Until then, we would have to deal with the moral dilemma of passing the cost-reflective price to the market, which sometimes will be too much to bear and will create a political situation, or indeed subsidizing it, which also then wipes out whatever profit we make from the sale of crude oil. So that's the moral dilemma. Will it be solved in a year? Hardly. In 2, maybe not. But it is a good thing that the basis for subsidy has been partly lifted, because there were 2 laws that underpin subsidy. It is a particular schedule of the Petroleum Act which empowered the president to be able to control price, and indeed the Price Control Act. Now I need to check. I'm hoping that the provision in the Price Control Act that that listed petroleum products as one of the things that can be fixed as price is also removed. So the legal basis for eliminating price control is taken away. But the policy issues will need to happen. We need to find a way not only to license refineries, but to incentivize them to come on stream and to perhaps think about how we can, I don't know if the word is to encourage them to look beyond just the Nigerian market to perhaps the West African and indeed the Sub-Saharan African market in terms of the potential for where this can go and grow that capacity. I mean, Singapore, that does not produce a drop of crude, has significantly more refineries than Nigeria does, and I don't remember the numbers here now, but perhaps where so you can go look it up. So that is a space we need to unlock. Until that happens, then we will have to play this balancing game, which is not an easy one to do at every point in time. But let me just say that we have the basis to be able to do it, at least as far as the law goes. We now need to ensure that the right policy frame, the right policies are in place to ensure that we increase capacity.
Almost finally, the IOCs also have a big role to play here when it comes to the PIA. Well, some have even alleged in the past that they thwarted efforts to pass the PIB. Do you see this very one? Would you say it favors them, or what would you say about it?
Well, again, I mean, sometimes I'm asked the question as to what the disposition of the IOCs are, or how they would respond to this, and quite frankly, I can't speculate as to how they would accept this or receive it, except perhaps to say that if we want to hear directly from them, we can ask them either individually or indeed approach what is known as the OPTS to get their collective point of view. But having said so, I should mention very quickly that the process that brought us to this point was a very consultative one. The IOCs, as far as I'm aware, were really taken, were carried along, and they probably didn't wait to be carried along. They did come to the party, they made their representation, and some of the things we have heard is that at least the fiscal framework is to their liking. But when you say that, there are a couple of other things I can probably just touch on very quickly. First one is that in terms of the global strategy of some of the IOC companies, it probably is not entirely in their interest to remain in some of the terrains that we have in Nigeria. So we hear sounds of some of them exiting, and I'm not sure it is entirely linked to the legal framework or the fiscal framework. It's probably a combination of a number of things. In the case of Nigeria, there will be, of course, the legal framework, which is substantially fixed. There is the state of security, and then, of course, there is the global issue of the energy transition. So as they're looking at the options and making those kinds of plans, I think we need to be. To lose the IOCs generally, and I do not speak for the IOCs, would at this point in time will probably not be the best thing to happen. The reason is that the amount of capital and expertise the IOCs can deploy is probably most critical at this point of our development. You need a backbone to the system that would allow some of the indigenous companies to be able to tee off and grow on top. If you talk to anyone who has attempted to finance even the smallest space today, you find that the places we can go to for funds and for finance are becoming more constrained. And I think that not having the IOCs in the room will probably hurt us a bit, but should we capitulate and then essentially just allow our legal framework to be dictated by the IOCs? Probably not. But I think that we need everybody at the table at this very critical time. And that's probably a key message to put out there.
All right, before I let you go, just in 1 minute, let's do this in 1 minute. When do we start to expect the positive to start trickling in, as the steering committee has 12 months? What should be the first quick wins for them, or what should they start to do immediately?
Well, the steering committee is exactly that, a steering committee, and our expectations would be, should I say, further advised when they then name the bureaucracy that supports them. The steering committee is only a handful of people. I would expect that they would take on board a number of industry-type experts, consultants, and set up a solid bureaucracy around their activities. In my discipline, we say the angel or the devil, depending on where you're leaning, is in the details. And it is when we see that, we can begin to make an assessment as to what to expect, how soon we can expect them. But at least on the books, we've been told that entity has about 12 months to turn in a report. So, in effect, the law has been passed. The transition will commence after 12 months. And so that is a lot of time for people to prepare, if you will. At times I felt, I feel like it's a bit too long, but again, let's see how we go from here. So I would say let's wait for how the steering committee names the next level support, and then we can start to determine whether we have square pegs in square holes, around pegs in round holes.
All right, I must thank you very much for your time. It's been nice having you join us. I've been speaking to Mr. Israel Aye. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us on the show. We really do appreciate this.
Thank you very much, Tolu. Always a pleasure.